Welcome back, guys, to the Hip Hop Report. I'm your host, Rambo Hustle, once again back with another review. This week discussing Joyner Lucas's debut album, the much anticipated ADHD. Now, if you guys are familiar with Joyner Lucas, from the beginning of Joyner Lucas's career, you know that he was somebody that really came out and created some amazing and dynamic visuals that delivered and elevated the style of his music. Now, of course, when he came out, shout out to Lemon Water, by the way. When he came out, the idea of rapping fast and rapping good and being a lyricist just wasn't really promoted in hip-hop that much. Where now I think we're starting to turn the corner to where people are wanting and willing to consume hip-hop that has a little bit deeper message, that showcases a little bit more skill, and and people are just becoming smarter, so I think they're not as demanding of dumbed-down, half-retarded music that says nothing about nothing. Now, interestingly enough, the album ADHD, outside of the record ADHD, which, you know, God forbid doesn't actually address the issue at hand, lemon water, the album itself doesn't really capture that. I mean, the only thing that has attention deficit disorder is the track listing itself. I mean, while there is about, 7 to 9 records that I really like on this record that really showcase Joyner's particular ability to rap fast, but rap good, say things, and actually make good hooks, which, I think he has a dynamic sense of balance when it comes to those two things, where he can give you hard lyrics, he can give you fast lyrics, he can give you lyrics that actually say something, but at the same time give you hooks that actually are catchy and that you want to repeat. A perfect example of that is the record I Love, which ironically I do love that record, but he doesn't give us as much of the melodic hook skill level that he actually has on this album. The album runs about 18 records. He has about 4 skits on it. 2 of them being very awkward and odd. It's just this concept of a doctor showing a young kid pictures and everything's fine and normal, and then it just takes a hard left, and we don't really know why, we don't know what happened, we don't know the dynamics of this, and he doesn't seem to really explore it. Instead of carrying those skits over into like a 3rd and 4th one that kind of really developed that storyline to where we get to that point, it just starts off really abruptly, and then it just, after that, we just never really hear from the doctor until the end of the album, and between there we get a couple skits from Kevin Hart, and then we get another skit. It's just, again, and maybe that's the concept. Maybe the concept of the album was just to just throw everything on there, so you could just say, oh, well, it's ADHD, and that's why. I have this weird, odd sense that maybe this album, just like Jay Electronica's, wasn't meant to come out right now. I feel like there's this pressure for artists right now to release as much stuff as possible because of the pandemic and everything that we're going through. I feel like a lot of artists are feeling the pressure that maybe music isn't going to be viable for very long. Maybe they're afraid that that this situation that we're in is going to kind of break down our society to a point where people not only don't care, but they have no avenue or no means of consuming music. Because honestly, this album, as much as it has great records, it has bangers, it has lyrics, it has very dynamic concepts to it, it just seems like somebody had a great track listing and somebody hit shuffle right before they submitted it to the label and to the streaming services, and then shit just hit the fan. And the shit went everywhere, and there's no order, there's no control. A record like Revenge to me has a great sound, a great vibe, where you could start the album off like that. Or even ADHD. Instead of having this odd intro with the doctor and then going into I Lied, which I do like the record I Lied, but I just felt like it was misplaced. I thought there was, especially right now, he just released a video for Will, which I love the video. It reminds me of G-Eazy's Almost Famous video concept. There's a couple artists that have done that in the past also, but the video, I mean, his videos, if you remember I'm Racist, that video was incredible. It was impactful, it was dynamic. I would have almost liked to see that record on this, even though it's super old and super dated in regards of where we're at. I don't think it's dated in regards to our society and where we're at with the topics and things like that, where, you know, maybe like a record like ISIS with Logic, which is basically Joyner Lucas rapping really fast and Logic rapping really fast and them going, hey, who can rap the fastest, and not really say anything at all. Like, that record makes the album, but I'm Racist does not, where I think I'm Racist has more relevance now than the ISIS thing. And then the ISIS thing, again, I'm not a huge fan of Logic or his music for that matter, but I understand why that record's on the project, because, you know, Joyner Lucas fans for sure like Joyner Lucas's music because of how he raps. So it would be kind of a discredit to them to not have this on here. However, I think that in regards of having concepts and records that really touch base on what's going on today in society and are lucrative to what's going on in the world, I think that one had a little bit more weight. Now, other records that I really enjoyed, like I said, Revenge, I thought would have been a great intro, as well as ADHD. I Love is a record that I loved from the beginning, and I thought that was going to be a record that got pushed a lot harder and that you know, created a lot more headway for Joyner, as well as Still Can't Love, which, it's odd because he has a song called I Love and Still Can't Love, and so now I can't tell if he can love or he can't love. And I know that sounds weird, but again, like I said before, I'm kind of a stickler when it comes to like track listing and track order, and having a track listing that kind of tells you a story, and that kind of, at least if not sonically, you know, on some level kind of brings you from point A to point B. Now, I Lied is a good record, and Devil's Work, if you guys remember that, that's the video where he was in the church and he was talking about all the people that God took and if he could bring them back and take them for somebody else. I like that record as well too. Again, way too soon on the project. Goldmine is a record that I think, you know, if I put it on the album, I would actually use it, only because I feel like your average hip-hop rap fan is gonna take to it because but you know, again, me as a particular, like, I'm very particular about my hip-hop interests, right? So Joyner Lucas has a very particular flow, and this isn't it. This is the flow that everyone else, Gunna, Young Thug, that every other rapper that's doing trap music is delivering. So for me to hear him do this flow is kind of a turnoff, honestly, because I know that's not his pocket. Now, of course, artists like him do struggle a little bit to find a variance in their pocket, because the double time flow is kind of his thing. His fans that's what they like, that's what they gravitate to, and that's kind of like his niche. That's kind of his niche to where he wants to deliver and how he's comfortable delivering. So I'm surprised that because of this, that we don't get more surprises in the side of features, and we don't get a lot more things that we haven't heard of before. Now, again, you know, the ISIS record with Logic, that's been out for a long time. We do get the Chris Brown feature, but I think that record on Finally, even though I think it would be a great closer, I think it's also suffers from just like very lackluster and subpar production. I think that constant riff that you hear is super annoying. It just sounds kind of cheeseball. And then we get the Fabolous feature, which, you know, ironically enough is on Still Can't Love, which comes after I Love, which doesn't make sense in the general sense of the album, the structure, the transition, the progression of the album. So again, I don't know if this was done intentionally to say, well, it's ADHD, so we're just kind of all over the place. That's kind of the concept. Nah, man, like, we have to, regardless of what your concept is, it should not take away from how the consumer consumes the music. Like right now, you know, the Will record should have been a lot higher. You know, I think a lot of these records should have been a lot higher, and there should have been more of a story being told through this. I think the doctor skits are kind of odd and just left field. I think the celebrity skits could have been put in the back end of records, so like that they don't kind of crowd it's just like, I don't know, I have this odd feeling that we're still chasing streams. We're still feeding the beast more songs to level up the streams. Now I guess that's another question. If I put 4, 5, 6, 7 skits on my album and each of them get streamed because they're 4, 20, 30-second songs, does that count as one full stream? It's an interesting question that I'm going to try to do some research on, because I'm really curious about how that adds up in the grand scheme of things. Now listen guys, you know, I know I tend to kind of nitpick albums, but I think it's important to do that because, you know, if I'm reviewing an album, it's because I respect and I like the artist and I like his music and I like the album. It's not, you know, but for me, it's really important to figure out the things that you really like and the things that you don't like. You know, like I said before, Revenge, amazing record. ADHD, if you haven't seen that video, especially the one that's divided, that you can see the shooting of the video and the actual product, I think that's amazing. And just to me, his visuals have always carried his music further than his music will carry him alone. I think him in itself, he has a little bit of the Wale effect, where his image doesn't quite sell you on who he is. He doesn't have the interesting factor where he looks particularly cool, or he stands out, or he has any particular characteristic that makes him him. You know, if he has a hat on or he has a jacket on, whatever, he doesn't, you know, there's no particular style to him outside of how he raps, that if you saw him you would know who that was specifically. Kind of like when Schoolboy Q came out and he had the bucket hat. So I think because of that, there is some struggle you're going to get with Joyner Lucas in regards of his climb to be considered one of the greats. Now, does he have the potential to do that? Absolutely. I would love to hear him focus more on the melodic hooks and the choruses, because I think he does have the ability to write them. However, I do think that in the future, some of his projects are going to have a little bit more collaboration and have a little bit more back and forth with other artists, because I think that gives us a break from his flow that is going to be, for the most part, consistent. Again, I don't know. I really feel like, based on what we're going through in our country right now, a lot of artists are forcing rollouts and forcing releases that weren't ready to be released, and maybe that is the case. Like I mean, I said that about the Elec album or the Jay-Z Elec album. You know, so I don't know if that has a play on it, but I do feel like that is part of the problem, that maybe some of these albums are being rushed out and they're not really being worked all the way through. Because honestly, who knows how long we're gonna have music as a source. You know, that they said the Spotify numbers were up, and then the week later they're like, oh, never mind, they're actually down. And I'm not surprised. I feel like people aren't ready to consume music right now. Although I do think that Joyner Lucas makes the kind of music that people would want to consume right now, because it's like you can't really consume party music during an epidemic, and you're not going to consume super sad music. So you need stuff that's going to be hard-hitting, motivational, and get you to the next level. Once again, guys, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you like this video. If you don't, then I guess just come check out the next one, and maybe I'll convince you about that shit later. In the meantime, subscribe button down below, youtube.com/TheHipHopReport if you want to visit us again. And of course, check us out on Instagram at Rambo Hustle Podcast, or on Twitter at TheHipHopReport. Hip Hop Report Pod. I gotta change that handle. That handle sucks. Either way, guys, have an amazing weekend in your house. Don't go out. Stay the fuck inside. Try to find something you love. Try to work on your craft. Get your shit together, because whenever we get back into the streets, it's go time.